Said there was one simple fact which explains what is going on in Niger and how it can be resolved. France is in Africa and must get out. While France was forced to grant political independence to its African colonies in the 1960s, it never gave up economic control of these countries. In 2023, while these former French colonies remain among the poorest in the world, they continue to provide the money and boundless resources that keep France and its allies, NATO and the US, among the world's wealthiest nations. The coup in Niger is a declaration that, quote unquote, we have had enough. And Burkina Faso, Mali, Algeria, and others have said that the Niger support is going to be to resist any armed intervention. But there are other unspoken but underlying realities in this situation. Niger possesses natural resources, in particular uranium, 30 to 40% of Europe's uranium, crucial to Western Europe's nuclear energy needs. Niger also is one of the countries through which the Trans-Sahara natural gas pipeline is being built from Nigeria to Western Europe. This pipeline starts out in Nigeria, goes through Niger, up in Algeria, correct? All right, Nigeria, there you go. Niger, Algeria, and then they branch out. So, it's called the Trans-Sahara Natural Gas Pipeline is being built from Nigeria to Western Europe. This pipeline is of critical importance for Europe since the U.S. attempt to weaken Russia by destroying the Nord Stream pipeline. Over here in Ukraine, on that way. Niger is the site of the U.S. Agadez drone base, which includes armed Reaper drones, and is the largest facility of its kind in Africa. Not the only one. They didn't want us to think it is, but they're the only one, we know. It is these considerations and hypocritical demands for, quote unquote, respect for democracy, which are driving Western reaction to events in Niger. Small intro, to where we at, right? So, at this particular point, I just want to bring up one of our comrades in a sister organization, Party for Socialism and Liberation, to say a few words about a rally that they had recently. Where was that?
It was out in the French consulate.
Stand up, bro.
Perfect. I will. It was at the French consulate last week, and thank you, Kamau, and a couple others who were there. It was all we can say is that it was a critical moment. So we knew we had to go out and do what was necessary to bring it directly to the doorstep of the French government, to attack their lies and to try to bring to the masses of people some knowledge of what was really going on in Niger, knowing that this is a critical moment for our people there, tens of thousands of them out on the streets. It's even being reported over the past several days from the Nigerian media and even some allies of the president of Nigeria that as many as 40 babies are dying every single day in Niger due to the sanctions and the power cuts that are affecting the hospitals. We know that 42% of people living on less than $2 a day, 43% of children in Niger are, involved in child labor, many of them in the mines and the gold mines. So we wanted to bring this to the forefront of understanding how even the past government that has been pushed out said that they were sitting on top of a social time bomb. They said that to Macron last year. Obviously, that time bomb has gone off. So it's not a coup. This is not some authoritarianism, but this is an act of great democracy. And we wanted to stand shoulder to shoulder in solidarity with the people of Niger, the people of the broader Sahel, the people of Africa who are rising up in such a profound way, and call on people here to unite with them, show solidarity, and raise our voices not just against France, but also against the United States, which we know is just as complicit and working in the same level. And I'll just close by saying this. I'm glad, Kamal, you brought up Algeria, because it just came out today that Algeria was blocked from BRICS by France appealing to India, saying that we don't want Algeria to be in BRICS We don't want their influence in BRICS. Obviously, Niger is a big part of that. Mali is a part of that. Burkina Faso, Western Sahara is all a part of that. So we can see France's bully tactics, just still on multiple different levels. So I appreciate the opportunity to say a few words. I'm honored to be here with y'all, and we'll keep struggling and keep moving and doing what we can to have solidarity with the people in the African continent as they fight.
France out of Africa.
France out of Africa.
U.S. and NATO too.
U.S. and NATO too.
At this particular point, one of our other sister organizations from Cote d'Ivoire, Eddie, please come up.
Eric, Eddie.
Thank you.
Right, that's fine. No, that's fine. I think I'm loud enough.
Yes.
All right, there you go. It's always a pleasure to be in the midst of December 12th, and it's still going and going and going. We made some arrangement and got to be here for this important gathering, information sharing, but also getting some perspective. And I want to thank the Socialist party reps for what you did in front of the French embassy not long ago, and it is I would say well done, well indicated, because we cannot talk about what French-speaking Africa, a term that I'm using here for the purpose of us understanding the region of Africa that I'm talking about, but we cannot therefore talk about the history, the political situation currently, without insisting on the presence of a French living there. The reason being that, unlike other powers that years ago were the colonial powers in Africa, when it comes to France, it is clear that they never left, not even some sort of living without living, but when it comes to France, they never left. And this can be seen way back in the type of colonial agreements or the agreement that was signed with all of the 8 in West Africa countries that were under French colonial rule before. Early in the 1960s, when those countries fought in the aftermath of the Second World War to reclaim their independence, freedom for the people, under the wing of so many leaders, some agreements were signed. Les accords de coopération, cooperation, agreements that were signed. And those agreements were the most dubious things that what you may imagine. We grew up, I went to school in the Ivory Coast, and it's only in our adult ages, not even being taught in the university, about the content or the exact contents of those agreements. One of them is, for instance, that when it comes to military defense, those countries, Niger, Cote d'Ivoire, Benin, Togo, Burkina Faso, Mali, will be actually under the French defense system. That's one of the partnerships. In return, the natural resources, right? The natural resources that were discovered at the time, and those that will be discovered in the future, right, will be the prerogative of, the French first before anything else. Yeah? From 1960s, even with the creation of regional bodies such as the ECO, the Economic Community of West African States, which was created in 1975 to reduce the volume of trade between the African countries and France and expand more of a trade among the African countries, it never materialized. At the end of the day, if you take Cote d'Ivoire, where I'm from, we continue to produce cocoa, and we are very proud of being the first cocoa producer. But here's the thing, like in Niger, that produces uranium, as the brother shared the statistics, With the same thing with the natural resources or the agricultural resources. Over $100 billion of revenues in cocoa. Less than 6% of that revenues goes to the farmers, who are actually the main productive or labor force behind it. So that's the background picture, if you want to look at it. We are winning, as the brother said to introduce this session in here, is exactly what is happening. There are steps in this victory, and for us who are involved in the social movements, we understand that you got to celebrate every little victory that you get to the larger victory. And there is a victory. Why is it that there is victory? Victory number one is there is a momentum shift. Tremendous momentum shift at this time. As we look at, the geopolitics of the world today, the BRICS countries are actually weighing more and more. It is amazing that the coup in Niger that occurred on July 26th happened in the same context of the BRICS forum that took place in South Africa, which again announced the entrance of multiple other stakeholders, including Saudi Arabia, those countries that are also pumping resources in Africa, but also promised a new development bank. Now, when we look at all of that, it is the reduction of the Western countries' influence, France, the European Union countries, and even the United States, their influence in Africa. Is that going to translate into the African countries, and here in Niger, being more in control of their natural resources to guide the welfare of their people? That's the one question that we are getting to resolve. However, in the current context, why I say we are winning, and there is a victory in there, as I said, momentum and thoughts. More and more young people, as we hear people talk about why is that Africa is important, in the next 5, 10 years, 25 years, over 40% of young people from 0 to 25 will be in Africa. And everybody is trying to tap into this or unleash what they call the human potential of Africa. You talk about the platform economy. It is growing more and more in Africa. All that is clear. But you have young people today in Niger who, before the coup, have done their best, voiced their concern regarding the presence of the French troops in, and even blocking military convoys from passing. After the French were asked to be out of Mali, not that they left completely because they still have a military bases in there, but the operation that was put in place to eliminate quote-unquote terrorism, which here I'm going to call global political violence, not to get into this Western-centered discourse, have not done anything. Whether it is Operation Bklyn, Takuba, you name them, troops being sent from different countries, France, Germany, nothing. Years after years, right? And over a decade. For the president of Niger, Mohamed Bazoum, who was deposed on July 26th, I said, to claim to his own military that but the terrorists are more powerful than the other. We can pause it in there. It means what it means. It means what it means. And not only that, this leader has been seen by many people as a strongest ally of France. Now, here's the question that young people are asking. Why, after so many years, with all of these sophisticated weapons, we talk about French troops, and France is one of the best military in the world. How come you cannot defeat this terrorism that is actually destroying lives, preventing people from working, and every single day in villages you have defenseless people being killed from Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, Chad, and all these countries. So yes, victory is, can be read from that perspective as well. Another thing, or another way to also understand this victory, is the reaction to the fact that if uranium that produces power, energy, electricity in France and other European countries is being pumped from Niger, how come the Niger people themselves lack electricity? For me, it is not a matter of economics here, it is simply a matter of considering that people are human beings. And unless, beginning with the French and many European and Western powers, they understand that people who live in Africa and native of Africa are human beings, things will not change. There is no way you pump all these uranium years after years with Areva, a company that has changed its name now not long ago, and then in those villages. The same way in Nigeria. The Niger Delta area is where gas, oil is being pumped, but yet when we talk about environmental destruction, it is in the Delta area, and it is also in places where people lack basic amenities. This is what young people are reacting to. And when we talk about statistics, young people also understand, always looking at Niger as the poorest country, right? Who wants to reel on that statistic years after years after years after years, understanding that we are not talking about a population the size of the United States, but a population that is sitting on important mineral resources that are feeding and providing welfare for people all over the world. This is what people today have, if you want, ingrained, and the discourse is built around that. That's why I'm talking about the steps in victory in India. When the coup happened on July 26th, and of course, when it happened like that, you can read all kinds of things. It's simple that, Niger is not the first time that Niger has a coup. Right? A little bit of history, it's not the first time. 1960, around there, before the 1970s, Seni Kunche, general of the army, took over Amani Diori, who was the independence leader, and then after him, there have been a succession of a coup, like in Nigeria. But from the 1990s, it seems to have pulled down a little bit. And now you have elected leaders. But what does it mean to have elected leaders that cannot deliver on the promises of either multi-party politics or what we call, democracy? There is a survey, the Afrobarometer, I think it's way back to 2021, whereby many people surveyed in Africa are today wondering whether electing leaders and going to the polls every 4 years or every 5 years are actually effective in delivering what needs to be delivered for people's welfare. People are doubting. And when we talk about the decline of democracy on the continent, these are some of the reasons. People have lost faith in the leaders, whether they are elected leaders, civilian leaders, or so it is not that the people in Niger, as you heard them, it is not that they are applauding a coup. Nobody wants to live in a country where you have political instability. At least we can give this kind of rationality to the people in this country. Everybody wants to wake up. There is a political leader in the aftermath of the coup, especially when the ECOWAS announced that they will use military force to intervene and bring in states. They ousted the president. That political leader said, all that people want is what? Go to bed. Wake up in the morning, go to work, feed or fend for their families, for their children, and life goes on. If a regime is not capable of delivering that, then there is a failure. We don't have to wait until the country is in shambles, there is a war, before we talk about failures in India. And this is what is a key. So when the coup happened, momentum kind of sort of built in India. What also irked people, and is irking quite a number of Africans, is the fact that the political leaders from the ECOWAS who themselves were talking or mulling the idea of a military intervention are themselves people with a dubious or very questionable political legacy. Alassane Ouattara from Côte d'Ivoire, for instance, who sought a third unconstitutional, term in power, has taken the lead in that. They recently elected the president of Nigeria, same thing. Before February 2023, people put and bet on the elections in Nigeria. It is the largest democracy, right? If what happened in Nigeria was successful, without any kind of a sham election, as we said, it will have sent a template to the rest of the West Africa region first, and to the rest of Africa. But yet, with all this money being pumped in this election in February 2023, people came out disappointed. And it was a disappointment. But the good thing is, contrary to what happened in the prior years, we have not heard of a mass killing, violence following this election. Maybe that's what we can be proud of. But a leader who was elected through this kind of elections, for him to be brandishing military action against, whereas the ECOWAS have not been able to muster strength to intervene militarily in each of those countries impacted by global political violence, people wonder, but what kind of reflection is this? Right? Or whose the purpose, whose objective, whose goals are we serving with the military action in the end? And what the military action actually going to do? So this kind of a pump people again to resist to that. The French president, again, stood ready to support any ECOWAS troops going in Niger to reinstate the ousted Mohamed Bazoum. Personally, I don't think that this is going to happen. It should not happen. It must not happen. And the reaction of people in Nigeria indicates that. I do not see, again, how the president of Nigeria will authorize that when actually home he is facing every day reaction from people because of the removal of the subsidies, the oil subsidies, that automatically, will jack all kinds of prices, oil, food prices, up. And the Nigerian workers have been striking, demanding, their actions in the day. If Nigeria does not take the lead, well, there's a good chance that this does not happen. Even if our man in Côte d'Ivoire is speaking a lot, we saw the debacle, in Mali when an issue that was even brought today. But back to Niger, there's also been support from other countries. Mali, Guinea, and Burkina Faso. There's three countries that also reverted back to military rule, 2020, 2021, 2022. The leaders from these three countries sent a delegation in to the Niger junta to support and voice their support, and they even made a public statement that sending troops to Niger to reinstate the president will be a declaration of war against them. These are momentous shifts, discourse that we have never heard in West Africa in recent years. That's why I say again, this is victory. For these leaders to be bold enough and say, hey, you don't care whether it is the French or whatever it is, you're coming in there, it means that you declare war against us also. But it has been interesting at least to see that Secretary Blinken, right? The US, Secretary of State, took, I would say, a very mild, waiting position on that one. And this is, I think, a mastery of diplomacy right there. At the same time that France is talking about was sending troops or supporting any intervention, the US appointed a new ambassador in India. It means what it means diplomatically. It means that Niger continues to matter, like the rest of Africa, will matter for these powers at the moment where we have these geopolitical shifts with China increasing its presence in Africa. Russia increasing its presence in Africa. India has already been there because sometimes we forget that, but India has also been a good ally. So many African countries in the time of independence, and the Indians who know that will always talk about what Gandhi left them as a message. Right? So you have India in India as well. The other countries such as Turkey recently have also increased the volume of the trade in partnership with African countries. All these things put together, right, again underline what the brother called we are winning, and I agree with that. In wrapping up, this quick presentation about the situation in Niger. It is very clear to the Niger people. It is not a matter, the chant about French out of Africa, French out of Niger, has nothing to do with the hatred or hating, the French people. That's not what matters. That's not what the point is. The point is, like many other African countries, the Niger people do not want French meddling, interfering into their business. Same thing to nullify whatever people are saying. You have the French people who understand and say they hate us or they hate French people. It's not about hating French people, it's about hating French African policy that has not changed years after years after years after years. And now you have a new breed of young people. Sometimes, when you read the news about what is happening in those countries, people forget that these people are looking to the United States, right? For instance, as we talk about influence, and I'm going to end on that, the number of students who leave Africa to study in other countries, Europe is still leading, France is still leading, comes the United States after. Of course, many are going to China, India, and Russia now. But when you compare the numbers, still, the corridor from Africa to Europe, from Africa to the United States continues to dominate. It means what it means in terms of how those Africans, those young people are looking, at the United States. But what they need to see change is, how does all that lead to clear access to jobs, decent jobs, healthcare, good education for the family. These are the things that matter to people. Freedom of expression, freedom of association. This is what matters to the people today. And I believe that if we have a message to send to the US government about the sanctions, I am one of those people who continue to say, yes, it is true, when there is a coup, we want to activate a diplomatic mechanism to make sure that power goes from one hand to another through established mechanism election. Everybody wants that. But when there is a coup, or there is any other thing, imposing sanctions, for instance, removing Niger or Mali or Burkina Faso from the AGOA list, for instance, does not do anything else but do what? Harming, right? The most marginalized people, the artisans, the agricultural workers. These are the people who suffer the most when sanctions are imposed, not the top leaders. So I believe that this is also where we need to put emphasis when it comes to engaging the U.S. diplomacy. For instance, when it comes to dealing with those groups. General Tiani, who took over in Niger, announced that they will return the country to civilian rule in a span of 10 years. I'm sure this is also going to be a subject of a lot of talks, because 3 years may sound too long, but compared to where the country is, it also may sound too short and too small. And to come back on the image that you saw earlier about this pipeline, not long ago I was in Nigeria, and the flight took me from Abuja to Frankfurt. Of course, it was morning time. You can see crossing this entire area. It is amazing, right, to see this large plot of land that interests people. But again, my concern is, They are human beings that live in those areas. If the natural resources in there have to be taxed, they should be taxed for the benefit of human beings. Those in Africa, those in Niger, those in West Africa, those in the entire continent, and those in the world. It's a simple thing of humanity. Until Europe recognizes, and the Western powers, this humanity into that, anything else will be done, and we'll continue to see the same thing. This is what I wanted to present to you, and then we can, go into conversations regarding that. Yesterday, Roger was asking me my opinion about the military regime. Here's what I said. Niger is not it's not the first time that Niger is under a military rule. It's not the first time that we have seen military taking over in African countries. Nigeria is an example. From 1985 to 1993, it was a succession of military rules. Where was Nigeria before that? Zero. So it does not mean that military rule will set the wheels of the true revolution in motion right away. It doesn't mean that. So it is too soon for us to evaluate that. The same way it is too soon to throw stones at them. What we know is that people were dissatisfied. There's been a coup. What can the civil society do to accompany or put more pressure on the current military rule to prepare the country for, what can be constitutionally acceptable by the Niger people first, before the rest of the world. So this is my submission to you, brothers and sisters. Okay, no problem.
Thank you. Did y'all hear what Brother Eddie said?
Thank you.
Yes.
Did y'all hear those two words? A momentum shift. Underline that. A momentum shift. I mean, the whole world is changing. And this right here is what we call a momentum shift. Okay? And he described it. I mean, I just said a few words, but he went into it in detail. I gave the outline, he fleshed it out. Okay? And so we thank you again, my brother. US and NATO too. US and NATO. Friends out of Africa.
Friends out of Africa.
US and NATO too.
US and NATO too.
Comrade Omowale Clay.
All right.
I want to take us back to 2 points in history. One was in 2011, when one of my comrades and I were in Libya. We were there about 2 or 3 months before the bombing started. And with that came the assassination with Muammar Gaddafi. Where was Muammar Gaddafi at that point? He was at creating an African currency based on gold that would be deposited on the shores of Africa, so that the Africans would not have to sell their souls to a currency that is falsely inflated like the American economy. He was murdered, assassinated, with the help of France and Sarkozy, who in fact got elected in France through financial support from Muammar Gaddafi. The treachery of the French. It also set in motion chaos around the whole Sahel that was being maintained with some stability by the power of Libya and the power of its oil and its resources in terms of resources, work, jobs, employment, development going over all across of Northern Africa, except for Morocco. Really, Morocco out. Fast forward, 2019 is when an ambassador from the AU to the United States, Ambassador Arikana, took up the question of being the AU ambassador to the United States. And in her mind, she thought one of my responsibilities as ambassador is to educate people about what's going on. What was the unfortunate target she picked? She picked the Francophone countries who were still to this day subordinated to the French through their currency. Not through a colonial chief, but through their central banks. People remember after World War II, after Bretton Woods, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, Europe was devastated. The United States economy rose up and subordinated Europe. And Europe further resubordinated its colonies. So I say that to say, France is at a juncture at this time. Ambassador Arikana raised the issue that 14 Francophone countries still serve under the Swiss franc, which subordinates their labor, their resources, and their energy to France. If they change their currency tomorrow, France would fall the next day. It is on the backs of Africans. And so this is a unique time for us. It's a very unique time for us because, as our comrade raised, there's a fervor sweeping across the world. And it is a fervor that targets the weakest of the links now, and that is France. Are there other contradictions in the world? Absolutely. But our struggle as revolutionaries is first and foremost to identify which is the principal contradiction at this moment in time. In Niger, they're not saying France out of Niger, they're also saying France out of Africa. In Senegal, they're saying France out of Africa. On Nostrand Avenue, they're saying France out of Africa. In front of the French mission to the United Nations, they were saying France out of Africa. In front of their consulate, they were saying France out of Africa. We have a responsibility that our brothers and sisters on the continent are going to free themselves. They're going to free themselves, and what our responsibility is to have their back. Like they need to have our back. The only course of action for Africa at this moment is France out. Very interestingly, and everybody, I don't want to repeat what we said, but we know the conflict in the Ukraine is the struggle between the United States and China. The Belt and Roadway that China is investing in Europe was the biggest investments in Europe. Wasn't coming from that, it was coming from China. Who's there back there? Russia. Where was the energy coming from in Europe? It was coming from Russia. So what happens as inter-imperialist conflict goes on? The reality is the United States sees itself on the other side of the giant ocean, and Russia and China consolidating themselves in terms of trade and development with Europe. Europe starts to look east in terms of its energy and in terms of the capital to rebuild its decadent cities. So what happens? A proxy war starts for the United States where they have Ukrainians killing each other, and the United States supplies them with weapons to do it. But more importantly, it holds those countries to NATO, which is not a diplomatic alliance, it is a military alliance. And they hold NATO to its subservience to the United States. It pushed Ukraine towards NATO, knowing it would exacerbate the contradiction and lead to this conflict. And so now what has happened? An explosion in the Nord Stream pipeline from Russia to Germany severs that. What does it create? It creates oil gas tankers coming out of Texas to deliver gas to Europe at exorbitant prices. And it rekindles, go back to the big one, Roger. It rekindles the desire to build the Trans-Sahara pipeline. And now the greed starts. Italy sees itself playing a strategic role in being the entry point for all of the gas coming from Algeria. All the pipelines are there already under the Mediterranean to Europe. except this new one they're building to Italy. So they're competing for who's going to control the energy since they tried to lock Russia out. So Africa plays a more strategic role because this pipeline, as my comrade said, is going to benefit who? It's going to benefit who? They're setting this up to once again enrich themselves at our expense. So we have a responsibility. And it's not a complicated responsibility, it's a difficult. Because you know what it requires of us? It requires unity. Unity of action. The same things we squabble about that don't exist in Africa, don't exist in New York. And to the degree that it doesn't exist is the degree that we suffer. So our position is very simple. We know France has to be out of Africa, but we say it's the principal thing because it's the weakest link in their chain. As the comrade says, we're winning. We can't determine whether we're losing because we're winning. Will that be forever? That's not forever. The question is, what have we taken into our hands to grab, to fight with? We have to fight with the slogan, France out of Africa, US and NATO too. Can't leave them out, but we want to identify where the target is. I'm not asking you to take croissants out your mouth. You should. But what I'm asking about our comrades here, because we didn't bring you here just to have a little forum and just talk shit. We came to bring you here to let's talk about some strategy and tactics to make France out of Africa a reality. That it wakes our people up because it's already in our heads that imperialism is killing us. Ethnic cleansing is killing us.
Yeah.
So we've got to unite, and we're at a dialectical moment where what's sweeping around the world is it's time for France to go. How can this little country, and you know, they got contradictions inside France. They were just up in arms about them raising the age it is to retire. So it's like the explosion that we gotta make it explode and let Africa go. And we gotta take that up. We have some ideas about that. One is a joint statement from us on that question that we utilize our contacts, our sources, and the masses of our people to spread. The second is a campaign in the streets to put France out of Africa, US and NATO too, on city blocks, on walls, on, I wasn't gonna say police cars. But to put it everywhere, spontaneously, everywhere. And you know what folks will say? Oh shit, why? What's up? The third thing is, when the French president comes to the UN, we should meet the president at the GA. And we should work towards that. It's coming up in 3 weeks, September 19th. We should meet the French president. We should rally all of those who can be rallied. One line for France out of Africa, US and NATO too, now. And take that up. If we can do that, then we've concretized something that's a piece of meat that we can hold on to and say to our brothers and sisters in Niger, that we got your back. To our brothers in Burkina Faso, with that young revolutionary brother coming up, we got your back. Africa is not impoverished. Europe is impoverished.
Yeah.
They steal.
Yeah.
And they've been stealing. And we got to cut their hands off. One of our rallies that I rallied was to make France leave, you gotta bring them to their knees. That's the only way that they'll leave. And very interestingly, Sarkozy in the New York Times, he did a memoir. Interesting in it, he propagated, Europe doesn't really have a real contradiction with Russia. In fact, we should set our own course of action. That Putin is not that bad, but his line was back to inter-imperialist conflict. Whose interests is European. It should be in its own. Who's interested in the United States? It's in their own. They eat each other to death. That's the very nature of finance monopoly capitalism. To eat to death until there's only one standing. Our position is there will be one standing. The people. United. Will never be defeated. Straight ahead? Straight ahead.